Korea's two chip giants, Samsung Electronics and SKhynix, have announced their earnings for the first quarter of 2026, with SKhynix reporting its results earlier today. Both companies have recorded all-time highs in revenue and operating profit. For more on how the companies have performed over the first quarter, we have our business correspondent Park Junan here in the studio. Welcome back, Junan.
It's good to be back, Tommy.
So, Junan, Samsung Electronics and SKhynix have delivered what can only be described as a phenomenal results. Now, what are the numbers exactly? Tell us more.
Sure, let's break down the numbers. Let's start with SKhynix. The company's revenue was 52.58 trillion won, or around $35.5 billion US dollars, a massive 198.1% jump from the same period last year. SK's operating profit saw an even more dramatic rise as it reached 37.61 trillion won, up 405.5% year-on-year. That follows Samsung Electronics' record-breaking announcement earlier this month. For Samsung, its revenue was 133 trillion won, up 68.1% from the same period last year. What's more surprising is that its operating profit was 57.2 trillion won, a 755% increase year-on-year, marking the single best quarterly result in the company's history. To put both numbers together, the two Korean chip makers just generated roughly 95 trillion won in operating profit in a single quarter. That's nearly 14% of South Korea's entire national budget for 2026 in just 3 months. And what's interesting is that Samsung ranked third in operating profit, while SKhynix placed sixth globally. Samsung Electronics' quarterly operating profit was only behind US tech giants Apple and Nvidia. SKhynix generated more operating profit than US megacaps like Amazon and Meta. In fact, experts believe that Samsung could achieve the #1 spot in global operating profit if projections hold and memory prices continue to rise in the coming quarters, as widely expected. Let's take a listen.
That's because fixed contract prices are likely to trend higher on average. And as mentioned, NVIDIA's new products are set for a full rollout in the second half of the year. Given that volume is expected to be much larger in the second half than in the first, this is why Samsung's operating profit could exceed 300 trillion won. If that happens, as you said, the company could rank #1 globally in terms of profit.
However, since stocks are a leading indicator, an increase in profit does not necessarily mean stock prices will rise.
In 2026, performance is likely to keep improving each quarter, but if growth starts to slow or flatten, the stock price could come under pressure.
Well, so while companies are garnering big profits, investors should keep this in mind when making investment decisions.
Now, market momentum seems incredibly strong with chip prices skyrocketing and long-term supply contracts being signed. Junan, the question is, what is the fundamental force driving this rally, and are we anywhere near the peak of this entire cycle?
Right, Tammy. So let's look at March export data. So basically, memory prices have risen more than 600 to 800% year-on-year, which means demand for chips far outpaces the supply that the two companies can provide. But why do companies keep buying chips from Samsung and SKhynix if they're already so expensive? Let's take a listen to what an expert said.
Only a handful of companies can produce HBM, including Samsung Electronics, SKhynix, and US-based Micron, which means Korean firms hold more than half the market and are close to dominating it. Chinese companies do make similar products, but their performance still lags. So for high-performance memory, buyers largely rely on Korean suppliers. As AI moves into the inference stage and demand for high-performance computing grows, memory demand is expected to keep increasing.
In short, the most advanced technologies attract global capital, giving companies greater bargaining power when setting prices.
Well, while the numbers are record-breaking, Junan, what are some variables that could lead to slower demand or even earnings for both Samsung and SKhynix?
Well, even if the prices are going up, right, so that is one of the issues we should focus on, as a sudden drop in demand could trigger a drastic price decline. Here's what an expert said.
On the demand side, if a major hyperscaler falters, that's a key risk. And for general consumers, higher prices could reduce demand. Another concern is that Chinese players could rapidly gain market share if they catch up faster than expected. Korea remains highly competitive in advanced process technology. However, in less advanced areas, Chinese firms are catching up quickly. If that gap narrows faster than expected, it could become a risk going forward.
A planned strike by Samsung's labor union could serve as one of near-term volatilities as workers are demanding performance-based bonuses that match the company's strong results. If the strike, scheduled to run for 18 days from May 21st to June 7th, goes ahead, it could lead to tens of trillions of won in operating losses as well as potential supply disruptions, making it a short-term risk factor.
Right, that could be a variable. Chunan, thanks for the wrap-up. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Tami.